made contact and shattered.
At some point, Chris locates what's called a dry bag.
Law enforcement had considered Laundrie the only person of interest in the murder of his fiancée, Gabby Petito.
Reference to a missing 4-year-old, the parents have called in and advised that the mother had went for a walk, came home, now they can't find her. They've been yelling for her. She's been gone for about 10 minutes now.
Turn it over to another agency. Let's get some help.
Hello?
It's gone. Airbags are going on.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Sorry, I was just clearing my throat right into the microphone. Sorry about that. But anyways, good morning. We're going to be talking about the Dahmer case. There is that new Netflix show out, and it's all the rave. It's trending, and everyone's watching it. And it was just actually really accurate. And I think it's just brought a lot of discussion on the case back up. And it's just time to discuss it here. So thank you for joining me. I'm just waiting for some people to join us. So thank you for being here, Lisa. Thank you. And Candace. Good morning, everyone in chat. Hi, Florida. Hi, Jonesy. Yeah, we're just going to do a Dahmer discussion. I'm curious who in chat and everyone joining us, who has seen the Netflix series? From everything that I've been researching, it's just the series was extremely accurate. There were some discrepancies in dramatizations. Hi, Florida. Yes, 30 years later, Dahmer is famous again. And I'm hearing that a lot of people are planning to be him for Halloween. So it's interesting. But at the same time, I do have to feel for the victims in this case having to live through this hype, I guess you could call it. But yeah, it was actually really creepy. Took me a few days to finish it. Like normally, if I'm just in like a show that I really love, I'll binge watch it. But the thing about this one is like I loved it and it was really interesting, but it was like only in small increments. Do you know what I mean? Like I just couldn't sit there and just watch it and watch and watch it. It just was like a lot to take in, a lot to process. And I think that part of this live stream is just going to be like me decompressing just everything that I learned and everything that is discussed in that show. I have pages on pages of notes, guys. So I'm going to read through some notes. We're going to listen to a little excerpt from the actual trial. And then I want to dig deeper into the discussion of, whether Dahmer's issues were, by birth, just genetic, like a chemical imbalance, or was it something that was kind of nurtured and brought out in him just from his upbringing and care. And hello, Kezchick, Mod Squad, Jonesy. It's so good to see you guys. Good morning. Dahmer has always been fascinating, but the victims need our sympathy. And in my opinion, he's not a celebrity. I agree. I don't really actually in one of my Facebook groups, and you guys are welcome to join it. It's called Open Discussions on Disturbing True Crime Cases. It's a private group where we can kind of decompress and talk about these cases there in a Facebook form. So we've been talking a lot about Dahmer in there, obviously, and it's just unfortunate. Like, it's interesting to study these killers, but the way that people idolize them, like this girl got like Dahmer's tattoo, like his face tattooed on her thigh. And I was just like, I shared it to my group and it just kind of raised a lot of discussion in the group of like whether or not that was like appropriate or, is it taking things a little too far? Like there's nobody to idolize these people, like they're interesting to look into because it's just so bizarre. It's just so out of the norm and just disturbing. And I can't explain Dahmer in any other word that besides disturbing and just absolutely foul. And I don't know, it's just, he's interesting to look at though, because unlike Bundy and Gacy and Manson and other people who we consider, evil, it seems as though Dahmer, confessed and wanted to get everything off his chest in a way. Do you guys understand what I'm saying? Like, it's so strange that in all the research that I've been doing this past like 2 weeks, there's been so many mixed reviews and opinions on what personality disorders he has, what his diagnosis is. Even up into his death, there were doctors and all that were evaluating him, and none of them seemed to kind of agree on an exact diagnosis for him. So I find that interesting. And, give me 1 second, guys. Sorry. Okay, so what I find interesting too is, just while we wait for people to join us before I get started on things, his there's rumors about, what might have occurred to him as a child, essay rumors. And today we're going to be doing a lot of the abbreviations on YouTube, because obviously the matter that we're discussing is beyond disturbing and probably breaking community guidelines. So certain words and phrases, I know that you guys know the case and know this guy, so you'll know what I'm referring to. But there is rumor that perhaps a neighbor might have essayed Dahmer. He and his father deny it to the very end. And I just find that questionable. I feel like in the interviews that I've seen of his parents, it seems like there's a lot of denial and blame placing coming from the mother and the father. It seems like, yeah, there was that rumor, and I seen Christina Randall's video on it. That rumor, I think, though, that's the thing, is I think that got mixed up with the show Oz. Do you guys remember the prison show Oz? It was on HBO. There was a scene actually where that happened to an inmate in Oz with the broomstick. So I don't know. I never heard that rumor about Dahmer. I knew that he died in prison, but I think that people are getting that scene from Oz confused with Dahmer, because there was an inmate who died that way in that show. So I never heard that rumor for Dahmer, but that was definitely in the prison series Oz. Yeah, I don't know why she added that to her video. I've never heard that rumor, and it was easily debunked by just knowing that it was from that show, but not a lot of people have seen that show. But that was an interesting video. Like I said, I've been watching everything, even the court excerpts and clips and all that on court TV from this. So let me just start reading through my notes, okay? And then I'm going to play the video. And we'll get right into it. So I'm going to play a little pre-recording to kind of give you guys an idea of what we'll be discussing today, the nature versus nurture with Jeffrey Dahmer. And then I'll get into some notes and video interviews. So he was born in 1960 and he died in 1991.
Nature is what we think of as pre-wiring and is influenced by genetic inheritance and other biological factors. Nurture is generally taken as the influence of external factors after conceptions. Example, the product of exposure, life experiences, and learning on an individual. Nature versus nurture is a long-standing debate in biology and society about the balance between two competing factors which determine fate: genetics and environment. The debate on nature and nurture has a long history. Are people born with certain genetic gifts or curses? When a baby is born, is his or her entire life already written? The baby could have genes that are markers for intelligence, psychopathy, and cancer, allowing doctors to foretell a few years of success in school, followed by a few years in jail for some violent crimes, capped off with a death from cancer. Or does nurture win it out? Could the baby be born with all those genes and manage to avoid such a gloomy fate, provided he or she lives in a loving home that models healthy relationships and behaviors? Nowadays, many scholars take a middle of the road approach, claiming that neither nature nor nurture is stronger. Rather, genes and the environment have an interactive relationship in that a person's environment largely affects how a gene will express itself.
Okay, so now that you've just gotten a little background of what we'll be kind of talking about, um, sorry. So pretty much he committed 17 murders. They were all male from the ages 14 to 31. These murders occurred in 1978 to 1991. He was born in Wisconsin. He lived in Iowa and Ohio. And the problem I feel that started was, of course, his home life doesn't seem to be um, that great. I mean, that's putting it kindly. His parents got divorced when he was 17, but throughout his life leading up to that, he had witnessed them in extreme violent arguments. His mother and father both suffered from depression. It seems like they had their own issues going on, personal ones that trickled down into their parenting skills, possibly. It's saying that a lot of times he was neglected as a child. Um, his parents' issues add to or it pretty much led to him being left to his own devices even before, his parents got divorced at 17. I mean, it just seems as though they were in their own worlds. His mother apparently was on a lot of medications that were for psychiatric issues that she had. Apparently, she tried to unalive herself numerous times, and yes, Lady Sarah, he was killed in prison, and we'll discuss that at the end. So that is something that occurred that I feel like was just karma, justifiable, um, prison justice. Hi, Nikki Rex. It's good to see you. And allegedly, Brittany J. It's good to see all you guys today. Thank you for being here. So, when he was 4 years old, he had hernia surgery. And that is pretty much where the father is saying that he feels something might have gone wrong. Again, I'm not 100% buying into that theory. I mean, how many of us has had children or ourselves as children gone under surgery and none of us decided that we wanted to do what Dahmer did? I can't even put his actions into words because it's just absolutely horrendous. Um, but around 8 is when his fascination with dead animals arose. He never actually killed animals. He would simply just collect them that were roadkill and other dead animals. At one point, he even put a head, he decapitated a dog's head and put the head of the carcass on a stick, I believe, some sort of like shrine or altar that he created out of it. Um, but yeah, I find it interesting that he didn't kill the animals, but he collected them. By 10, he was bleaching the bones himself. I mean, his father was a chemist. It seems like his father was a very intellectual guy, but at the same time, I feel as though his father was just, like I said about the mother, wrapped into his own world, his own problems, his own career, possibly, being a chemist and everything that goes along with his job. He wasn't home as often as he should have been, possibly, or, it's just the way that it is sometimes in dynamics in homes. The mother spends a lot of the time with the children. In this case, the mother was not well. So while the father's off, doing everything that he can to provide, um, he's not, emotionally attached to his children because obviously he's busy working. But it also seems like the mother was not motherly or emotionally attached to Dahmer as well. He did have a brother. His brother was born when Dahmer was 6 years old. So the age gap between his brother and him, it's significant in a way that, your personalities as a child are pretty much formed by like 2 years old. Some people debate and say up to 4 or 5, but from what I've seen, like your personalities are set in stone by like 2. So the fact that his brother, everyone says like, well, his brother seems normal or his brother, blah, blah, blah. That is actually significant. Like if we're going to talk about nature versus nurture, because if they share the same genes, obviously they're not identical twins, but they have the same parents. Um, the background, the upbringing is different, in my opinion, because Dahmer was 6 years old by the time the brother comes around. The mother is reported to have had postpartum depression, um, on medications that I think she probably was addicted to because of what they are. It's not medications that you just take yourself off of, you know what I mean? So I tend to wonder how many times were there days that the mother was in some sort of like drug induced coma in a way, like overly medicated possibly, and the father's at work and Dahmer is, a child toddler, and he's just not being like nurtured, cared for, attention given to. He did not very well in school. He ended up graduating, but he was never like a straight A student. But at the same time in prison and during his evaluations, people referred to him as intelligent. So the doctors and all that saw him as intelligent, but during school and stuff, it was never anything that, was really his IQ was like out of this world or anything like that. But his teachers found him to be quiet. He got in trouble a lot in school just from doing things for attention. It seems like he would shout out at random times. He would conduct pranks. He poked fun of peoples with disabilities, and that's when his drinking started. So, just a lot of stuff already going on in his early childhood and in his teenage years. Like, why was it so accessible and easy for him to get alcohol? You know what I mean? He was collecting bugs in bottles, which I find normal. I mean, I remember collecting caterpillars and creating like a little habitat for them and having them in like a big mason jar. But he would collect them and put them in formaldehyde and decapitate small rodents. He learned how to use acid to strip the flesh off the bones, and all that was taught to him by his chemist father. So it's just very debatable. As I continue on, let me just look at chat because I seen Mike said something about the father, and I think I want to read it. And good morning, everyone who has joined us. Jeffrey's father was not right to me either. He did so many interviews the rest of his life, wrote books, the profits he made off his son, signs as well. He missed, just my opinion. Mike, I am right there with you. Like, I've been watching, obviously, all this stuff. I wasn't going to do this live stream until I felt confident enough in this case and his background and all that. And some of the notes that I'm reading from are direct notes from Dr. Grande's YouTube channel. You guys know Dr. Grande, right? And the behavioral panel, those guys that do like professional work with body language and all that. So my notes are being directly from them as well. So, and Mike, his father, the behavior panel did a really interesting review on Dahmer, and they reviewed body language between an interview that Dahmer did with his father, and they just really broke it down like so well. And they're just talking about, thank you, Mike. Good morning as well. And good morning, Carolina. It's good to see you. So in the interview, I mean, you should watch that video. Actually, anything that I'm referencing, I will link in the description box. And if I forget to link another channel that I talk about, it's not done, intent, like there's no intent behind it. Like I just forget. So I'm sorry if that ends up happening, and I will link it as soon as I can. So there was a point in the interview with his father where they were sitting next to each other, and this is after Dahmer's already been in prison, and Dahmer's literally like on the other side of the chair, like away from his father, and the behavior panel was just breaking down their body language between each other, and they pretty much said, like, even though Dahmer appears to be closest to his father. Oh, you have seen it, Mike? Good. Oh, you have to see it. Yes, you do have to see it. Because they really tear the father up, and just from body language, and they're experts, so it was just really interesting. They pretty much say that even though it appears that Dahmer is closer to his father than his mother, that there is some baggage between the father and Dahmer, and it's unspoken. And that was the other thing that they were pretty much saying about Dahmer. It seems like a lot of his issues were issues that festered within him, that never got expressed, that never got, it's not like they ever tried to get out of him, like, what was going on in his head. It just seems, like I said prior, the neglect that took place, even though your parents aren't divorced, his parents didn't get divorced till 17. Um, all throughout that time, like, he's witnessing an unhealthy relationship between man and woman, mother and father at his house, and it's just absolutely sad when you kind of think and imagine, like, what he probably witnessed for him to turn out the way it was. And it seems, in my opinion, and very much of the opinion of the behavior panel, that the father is holding back on truth, and the father has more to do with the son's issues than Jeffrey wanted to admit, and anyone wanted to admit. And him writing the books, they even speculated that Dahmer is a product of a narcissistic parent. So they're speculating, again, this is just speculation, this is just opinion, that Dahmer's father was a narcissist. And unfortunately, that personality disorder can trickle down to your offspring in a way that they're not right, I guess, is the best way to put it, because of the way that the parents are, because they're a narcissist. So him writing the books about his son, everyone kind of looked at that as like raised eyebrow. Even when he was on Oprah said that some people might think that you're profiting off of your son's crimes. I also find that interesting because it's like, here's my thing. The rumors about his essay that took place as a child that everyone denies, I wonder if there is truth behind it. And it makes me wonder if the book writing by the father was a way for him to have the final word and get his um, voice out there and his story out there before Dahmer decided to actually come clean about the truth about something, or what, you know what I mean? Because I do think that him writing that book about his son so soon too, was interesting. And he kind of writes it off of, I want to be able to raise awareness and tell other parents, if your child is quiet, talk to them, try to get it out of them, whatever's going on in their head. And like, he says stuff like that. And I'm just wondering, how much of this is the truth? Like, does he really want to do that? And how much of it is self-preservation, because I mean, how can you not blame yourself a little bit as a child if Dahmer was your son? There would definitely be some like, what did I do wrong here? But I just think there's another level of his parents being sick themselves. And the book writing, I think, had a lot to do with his father just wanting to have the final say. And in a way, it sort of explains Dahmer's issues with control. Like, he talks about needing control over his victims, and that's why he sedated them, and that's why he preferred them to be either dead or unconscious as he had his way. And that's the thing, guys, is you guys all know that the things that he was into, the control issues, and he was obsessed with control and power, and his thoughts were obsessive thoughts of violence, and they were intermingled with, by the time he hit puberty, those thoughts of violence were intermingled with, obviously, sex. And that's where it comes into, he didn't want to kill. Allegedly, this is coming from him, Dahmer. He never, wanted to kill his victims. It was just, he wanted them to be, that's why he tried to drill a hole in their head and put acid in it. He wanted them to be alive. Like, he didn't want to do the killings, he says. And again, this is his words, so I don't know how much you want to believe is him amping up or excusing his stuff or whatever. But I mean, he has fessed up to everything, unlike other killers. But anyways, he pretty much says that, like, he wanted them to stay in a zombie state. He didn't want to kill them. Like, he didn't want them to leave him. He has abandonment issues, which is very common with children of divorce. And I can speak on being a child of divorce. My parents actually divorced I was the same age as Jeffrey. I was 17. It was my senior year. The difference, though, is my parents didn't abandon me. Like we hear and we see in the movie or the series, which is accurate, the mother leaves with his younger son and she's like, I'm out of here. That actually did occur. And he's not even an adult yet. You know, his brain is still forming. He's a child. He's seeing his mother abandon him. I mean, that's traumatizing. Divorce is traumatizing for children, but having his mother leave, 100% traumatizing. Yes, Jen Lu, I agree 100%. She said, I think the book was 50% about warning other parents and 50% about self-preservation. I 100,000% agree. And you know what else infuriates me about that thought and just the parents alone is after all these interviews that the father did about, I want to help other parents and I wrote this book to make sure that people are aware that, you know, you need to talk to your I mean, we've seen his interviews, the father. So why didn't the father want the brain to be preserved when Dahmer passed? I mean, he goes on and on. I'm a scientist and my mind is analytical and that's why I wrote this book. I was trying to understand what took place and I want to do my part in raising awareness, blah, 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 blah. So he dies and the parents argue over whether or not they should keep the brain for scientific research and to study it. I mean, it made absolutely zero sense that the parents fought over his brain, and I was like, make it just contradicts everything that the father was saying about why he wrote the book. And again, guys, Dahmer went to prison. I mean, he got arrested in 91. By the time he went to prison, I believe it was 92. But by the time he was killed, it was only 1994. So he spent a very short time behind, you know, prison. And during that time, already the father had written the book. So it wasn't even like it was, oh, my son's been in prison for 5 years. Like, you know what? I need to speak out. I need to get this stuff off my chest. It was immediately. It was yeah, I think he 100% was a narc himself. I agree. And yeah, it is bizarre. Absolutely. He was one of the most interesting serial killers to me. I think he is interesting in the sense that, you know, he didn't try to appeal his prison sentence. He told the judge during sentencing that, you know, he deserved it pretty much and he didn't need to walk around the streets anymore. Um, but anyways, back to some of my notes. You know, it just again, I just want to reiterate how much it made zero sense for the father not to keep his brain for study in science, being a scientist himself. Like, it's like, I feel like the father maybe was afraid of what would be discovered in the brain. Like, what would be discovered? Signs of like trauma or something? Again, Dahmer's parents got divorced. That seems to be like, besides the hernia surgery and medications that he was on, that the mother was on during the pregnancy when Dahmer was in utero, which by the way, the mother denies like a lot of what the father is saying she took. So it's just very frustrating. Like, uh, you know, before my dad passed, my parents finally started like doing holidays again with all of us. You know, they were divorced for, I don't know, 13 years. But once my sister had kids, it was like they reconciled and put their differences aside so that we could all spend the holiday together with the kids and all that. I just see Dahmer's parents as like those typical divorced parents who are still blaming each other. It's like, let it go, people. Like, you both had some part in this child's development and his upbringing. And it's just so frustrating to see like the parents like pointing the finger at each other. Like, it's just so typical of divorced bitter parents. It's just they have so many issues, you could tell his parents, that they never resolved or they never wanted to talk about themselves, and it's just obvious that it trickled down into their nurturing and care of their son, Jeffrey Dahmer. um, so like I said, his obsessive and unhealthy thoughts arose more during his puberty years. He had bizarre and demented fantasies with people who were deceased. He even tried that scene that he tried to dig up deceased body, that was actually true and the ground was frozen, so he never got a chance to. But just remember how sick this individual is. Him wanting to have the mannequin because, he's diagnosed with paraphilia and other philias, if you guys know what I'm referring to. But, the mannequin scene where he steals the mannequin and was trying to get like gratification with the mannequin. I mean, that was true. That stuff he really did. And which kind of plays into this whole, he wanted them kind of in a zombie, like not dead state, but not alive state. So that's why he liked the mannequin. It's just absolutely sick. He is a classic case of psychopath. He appealed to people as an average person who was harmless. People would never imagine him committing these crimes. He put up a good front to outsiders. I agree there's a level of, him, that's the thing, is a lot of experts are debating still to this day if they feel he falls under the classification of a psychopath. I mean, I can't comment on it one way or another, even after doing weeks of research on him. There's so many different opinions and different things that people are pointing out. They just can't agree. But so let me just continue a little bit and then we'll play some audio from the trial. So in 1978 was the first murder. It was that hitchhiker. It was after his parents divorced and he was abandoned. Both his parents left. His dad was living in some motel. And that's the other thing I don't get. Like, okay, so you get divorced. Why did both the parents have to go outside the house and like live somewhere? Like your activities that you were doing, like I understand the kids kind of get in the way of you being in your new single life, but like really you leave your 17-year-old son, it's inexcusable. And I feel like the father tries to like grace over a lot of times of how he left him too. Like he refers to the mother leaving him and it's like, okay, but you were living in a hotel. Why did you leave him? Like you might not want to be in the house that you and your ex-wife like built together. And it might be, traumatic to be in this setting that you thought was going to be like your house with your family. But to leave your son at that age and time, it's just, I don't know. And the father seems to like turn his nose up to it. Like he doesn't face it. But when that hitchhiker was picked up by Dahmer, apparently he hit him with a barbell and then strangled him. And that was the first murder. And then at his home, his childhood home is where he buried those remains in the backyard. But he did remove the flesh and the acid and crush the bones of all the evidence. 1978 in December is when he joined the army and he became a medic. Got discharged because of his drinking issues, which, we've talked already about him drinking in high school. His access to alcohol and him being able to drink so easily is another indication of like neglect to me. Like I know people drink at parties and stuff like that in high school, but him going to school with it, like how did the parents not know that? So you're telling me they left Dahmer when they got divorced, went their separate ways, and left alcohol in reach of this kid? Like how was he able to get alcohol at that time? I don't know. It's just more examples of why I think his upbringing have a lot to do with all this. And it has nothing to, I mean, I can't say it 100% that had nothing to do with anesthesia surgery as 4-year-old, but from what I've gathered so far and discussing with you guys, I feel like being under anesthesia for his hernia surgery probably has very little to do with why he did what he did. 1981, he was arrested for disorderly conduct. He was having an open alcohol container and resisting arrest. 1982, another arrest, disorderly conduct. And then he moved in with his grandparents, his grandma. 1983, he started working at the chocolate factory. In the mid 80s is when he was also arrested for lewd behavior. He exposed himself in public and was drunk. He was on probation for a year. And I don't know, I've only seen this one place. You guys let me know if you've seen it, or anyone watching on replay, please let me know what you think. And anyone who hasn't liked this video, please like it too. I forgot to tell you guys to do that. But I've heard that his probation officer not once went to his house, like went to his apartment for an apartment check. I've only heard that in one area of my sourcing, so I don't know if it's 100% accurate, but That is unbelievable, because when he's being sentenced, he actually apologizes to his probation officer and pretty much says, like, he was only trying to help me, blah, blah, blah. I'm sorry for what I did. And I'm just thinking, like, how did the probation officer never go to his apartment? I don't know. So 1987, he kills again. And this is the one where he claims he had no memory of it. He was probably blackout drunk, is what I'm assuming. But, he woke up, and that was when the gentleman was dead in his bed, and he just, like I said, had no memory of it. So he killed a 14-year-old and a 25-year-old in 1988, and he was arrested and sentenced for 10 months on SA of a minor who was 13. So 1989 is when he served that time. And then he kills again as soon as he's out. So 1990, there were 4 victims. 1991, 8 victims. 1991 is when one of the victims escapes. They find the photos with the body parts, all that, and you guys know he gets arrested. So let me just play a little clip from the trial. And I do have more notes, but I want to kind of change up the stream's vibe a little bit. So let me just play some audio from the trial, and then we'll look at some video interview, and then we can look at my notes again. So I'll just mix it up a little bit. So let me just play this audio while I grab more coffee. So again, thank you guys for being here. Please hit the like button if you haven't done so yet. And this is just a audio excerpt from the actual trial when they are speaking. So, and good morning, Roxanne. Good to see you. Give me 1 second, guys. Get it all set up.
In other words, it agreed that a human being can adapt to anything, like shooting people in combat. Went on, further said that killing, quote, got so routine, close quote, that Dahmer was able to concentrate on his work. Said that, quote, on purpose, close quote, he did not ask them who they were so that he would not get to know them, quote, so they were objects, close quote. The focus of my life was to find fulfillment and satisfaction with good-looking guys. The cannibalism, as he termed it, and the saving of body parts were just offshoots. Just having them for a few nights was not enough. Then I got into the offshoots, and but they couldn't be kept indefinitely. And finally, he said in talking about killing, said killing was not the satisfying part. Killing was just a means to an end. I told you that he preferred live people, even preferred the zombie, the experiment there. Said, quote, no, I didn't get a kick out of all that at all, the killing. That's why I tried to make it as painless as possible while they were asleep. I wasn't into torture, end of quote. Quote, dismembering them was not part of his sexual act. This is not a man that enjoys the killing, that says, I enjoy the killing. He had to drink to overcome the inhibitions. Found it distasteful. Psychiatrists call it aversive. But it was a means, as he put it, a means to an end. He wanted to continue the pleasure.
So that was just a little excerpt from the court in the trial. Just very interesting, in my opinion. But yeah, oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, let's be honest, Jen Lu said. Lionel was an odd duck himself. He thought those sunglasses would make him look unrecognizable. Oh my gosh, you're hilarious. But yeah, I mean, there's definitely some issues with the parents going on in this case, for sure. And I just don't know. I hate to do it, but I hate to bring up the Watts case. So many people kind of bashed Cindy Watts for standing by Chris Watts, and obviously her speaking badly about the victim didn't help her. But at the same time, I almost feel like there's like a double standard here, because Lionel, like, I feel like more people need to kind of raise an eyebrow to Lionel. I'm sorry, but whatever they did to their child is just, it wasn't right, in my opinion, and it just seems like issues were evident at home. Like there's no debating it. Alrighty. So let me just, oh, good morning, honeybee. Good to see you. Let me just share my screen in a minute. And we're going to just listen to an interview. It's kind of been clipped together. And then I want to go back to my notes, and I'll read from my notes while we look at the crime scene photos from Dahmer's apartment, okay? So again, thank you guys for being here. I just had to pour more coffee. I hope everyone's got their coffee.
That he had a double hernia operation when he, wondered whether he had his penis cut off when he actually just had a double hernia operation.
How
He
old
was
was he then?
concerned about that, about the same age range, about 4
He was
years
sick a
old.
lot, was he not?
He was very sick with.
And here's the thing, him being sick a lot, I wonder if that had a lot to do with just neglect. Like it wasn't like bad genetics or whatever. It had to do with nutrition, probably wasn't being focused on, do you think? I don't know. I just wonder if a lot of the sickness when he was a child has to do with just the parents not being there in a way. You know what I mean?
Ear and nose infections, and he would get injections at the local hospital.
So when
And-
you look back to times where I think in the same age range, because we now know your personality is formed by the time you're 6 years old. So whatever's there is there.
Generally, yes.
You show me a boy at 6, we'll show you a man at 36.
Mm-hmm.
Some people have said. So when the time he was walking through the house and asked you or your wife, what would happen if my navel was cut out?
I had a habit of recording him as.
Here's the other thing I don't understand. I had a habit of recording him, which I know my dad actually used to always record us all the time with like that huge 1990s like VHS video recorder that you put up on your shoulder, and it was like you had to plug it in. So I get that, but I wonder if part of him recording Dahmer had to do with Dahmer already showing signs of like, what is this kid talking about? Like, let me just grab my camera. But he like plays it off of like, I had a habit of recording him. It's like, did you notice something was strange? You know what I mean? And then he's when he talks about how Jeffrey was afraid about his things being cut off during his surgery, or asking questions about stuff being cut off during his surgery. I honestly wonder, and again, this is just my opinion, this is just my perception of things that I've researched. I wonder if the mother's anxiety issues were adding to Dahmer being anxious and asking these questions. Like, for example, if the surgery was being planned and it hadn't happened yet, was Dahmer's mother at home like nervous about it and saying things like he might die, or kids die under anesthesia, like who knows what level of anxiety, depression, all that the mother seemed to have been in. And parents say things and they don't even realize the kids are listening. So I'm wondering if like the mother was saying some anxious, disturbing stuff about the surgery, and Jeffrey listened and was like repeating things in a way. Do you know what I mean? Again, I'm just speculating, and obviously we will never know. Like, we're not flies on the wall of their childhood home, but I just wonder if like the things that he was asking about when it comes to the surgery aspect had to do with things he was like recording, or things that he was hearing, and then the father decided to record him. Yeah, that's true, honeybee. He recorded him like you would a subject in an experiment or something. I agree, and that is good way to put it, because he is a scientist. He has an analytical mind. He says so himself. So I wonder if, part of him having these records of recordings and all that had to do with research in a way, like, but it's his own child.
As a child,
Mm-hmm.
just, the old type, reel tape,
Mm-hmm.
just miles and miles of it. And I had that transcribed about a year and a half ago to regular cassette tape. And I came across this one portion where he asked me, Dad, what would happen? We were just engaged in conversation about his body. And he said, what would happen if we cut out my navel? And I can remember just passing it off at the time, and it was maybe just an innocent question.
That's one of those things
But
kids
now, looking back, yeah, it's just one of those things that kids say out of interest.
You say in your...
The other thing I wanted to point out that the behavior panel pointed out too in some of Lionel's interviews, not this one specifically, but it still is relevant for this interview, his blinking. They always talk about on that show or that channel, people being uncomfortable possibly, and that's why they're behaving the way they are, like blinking and all that. They're under stress. So what is the father being stressed out about, talking about his upbringing and stuff, and he's playing it off to Oprah as very like matter of fact, blah, blah, blah. But you see his blinking just like increase a lot of times on certain subjects.
Your book, Lionel, you say, I've come to believe that some of the compulsions that overwhelm my son may have had their origins in me. That must be a frightening realization.
It was one of the items that I wanted to investigate. Being a scientist, I want to throw out everything for
You're a scientist and a chemist.
Yes, right. And there are a number of things. Did he turn out? Most people want to know why this happened.
Yeah.
Number one.
Immediately, we all thought when we heard these heinous, horrible stories, we thought, who abused him? Did you abuse him? Was he abused? Was he sexually molested? Was he beaten as a child?
Those were the first thoughts that came to your mind.
Yeah.
Probably.
See, he seems super uncomfortable, in my opinion, when he gives this answer when she brings up abuse. And I just really wonder, Jeffrey's crimes being intermingled with gratification and pleasing himself, I just feel like there very well could have been some sort of essay that took place on Jeffrey that the parents and Jeffrey just never wanted to. Okay, Para Women Radio, thank you for being here and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you so much for stopping in. And so I just wonder if there is a level of denial or maybe they're hiding it. I just feel like when it comes to was Jeffrey abused, I feel like we're not being told the truth because Jeffrey himself denies it. And I don't know, guys, like obviously we'll never know the answer, but I just really wonder if there is a level of they're hiding something that has to do with abuse, whether it's SA or whatever, but I don't know.
I considered all kinds of things. Was it environmental, genetic? Was it perhaps medications that were taken at the time of, in the first trimester? Was it the effect of, the popular subject now, media violence?
Mm-hmm.
And was it genetic? These are all things to consider.
Was he molested?
No, he wasn't molested.
Was he physically abused in the home?
No, he was not physically abused. No.
So when you analyze, and you have a very analytical mind, that's what you do for a living. When you go back,
that's my training.
Yes, and when you go back, and the reason you say you've written the story is to try to make some sense of it.
Right.
As you analyze and go back over the years, trying to figure out how this could have happened, what have you concluded?
I've concluded that there are many more questions. I've answered some of the questions in my own mind, but very few. There's more questions that have been raised than have been answered.
A father's story. A lot of people would say, Mr. Dahmer, you're just trying to capitalize on the crimes of your son.
Well, money is not my prime mover at all. My main mover is to find out what went wrong and to help.
And again, excuse me, this sort of contradicts what happened when Jeffrey is killed and his body is being cremated, and they had the debate, the mother and the father, of what to do with Jeffrey's brain. Here the father is saying, like, I wanted to figure out what went wrong. Well, then why wouldn't you want his brain preserved and studied? It goes back to this guy's not being truthful, in my opinion, about things. It makes absolutely no sense to me that they wouldn't save the brain to be studied after what he just said here to Oprah.
People.
Mm-hmm.
And
could you have done that without writing a book, though, do you think?
I don't know. I've had so much interaction with people as a result of writing the book, so much feedback that I don't think I would have had if I would have just gone out on my own.
Yes, just looking at comments in chat. I wonder what happened to the brother too. Kate Danielle said, I wonder what happened to his brother. I would have changed my name. Same. And I'm glad, Mike, that you're liking it. I'm glad you guys are here for this discussion for sure. But yeah, thank you, Kezchik. It's crazy. From his description, you can see a kind of alienation between him and his child. The child is an object with certain characteristics. It is like this might be shared by father and son. I agree. I think there's a lot of, there wasn't a lot of affection at home, like allegedly what Brittany said. Hi, Allison. Good morning. I just feel like both parents aided into the development, obviously. I mean, come on, children are a byproduct of their parents. It's just kind of common sense.
Own and tried to, and I might not have investigated so fervently and
yourself
in depth.
Yes.
Myself.
Let me ask you, do you think that there are other Jeffrey Dahmers being bred out there?
Yes, I do.
He was drunk from the time he was 16 years old, going to school drunk.
It was somewhere in the 17, 16.
And I just wanted to take that moment to kind of, everyone described Jeffrey as quiet. And Oprah said, do you think there's other Jeffrey Dahmers being, conditioned or out there at home? And he said, yes, I do. And that is absolutely the truth. We've seen it. I mean, this interview is the 90s. We've seen so many cases up until today, children all the way up to, Chris Watts in his 30s, the quiet types. Why is that? You know what I mean? It's just even Tristan Bailey and the kid in that one, Aiden Fauci, whatever his name is, the quiet type, so there is something to be said about characteristics that are similar in these people. Not every single one is like that, though. You know what I mean? But Brian Laundrie, quiet type, Chris Watts, quiet type, Jeffrey Dahmer, quiet type, that Aiden Fauci guy, quiet type. I mean, there's definitely something to be said.
17, 18-year range, which was completely hidden from me.
And I just want to reiterate, I don't mean like if you're quiet, then there's something to be like red flag about you. But I'm just saying, like, these kids and these people who we've just listed off, they are beyond just being an introvert. They are just not socially like up to normal shyness, I guess you could say.
He was going to school. He was an alcoholic by the time he was 16.
It appeared to be so.
Going to school drunk every day.
And you see how like nonchalant he is about like being an alcoholic in high school. It appeared to be so. How did you not know that, Dad? Like, this is what I just don't understand. It's like the father has no remorse, no guilt, no anything. He's just very much like, oh yeah, I guess so. Yeah. People were telling me he was drunk. Like, how did you not know your kid was leaving the house with scotch in his cup? Oh, right, because you were living in a motel down the road.
Trying to cope with all of his fears of not being able to socialize and so forth.
Never came home drunk, never came home in a state that gave him away.
See, that just makes no sense to me too. Never came home drunk. You weren't there. You weren't there. Even before the divorce, I would assume he was probably at work during the hours Jeffrey gets home from school. Again, I don't know every in and out of the childhood, but what the heck?
Picked up liquor on the way at a friend's house.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened at school, drinking at school, apparently.
But by that time, he was already roaming the neighborhood streets on his bike and
Yes.
collecting animal remains. And
age 13, 14. It's just inconceivable. And it's also
how is a child able to dismember animals and take the skin off their bones? And I know you were a chemist and he had been around you and working with you at times, but how was he able to do that without you or your wife or your mother, anybody knowing that's what was going on?
Well, we had about 1 3/4 acres of heavily wooded property,
Mm-hmm.
and the adjacent properties were easy to hide. And Jeff was very good at hiding.
This is your home there?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And there were so many areas that he could have done it in, and he timed it.
And here is just so stupid. There was so many areas he could hide. So then you go find him. Like, you're the parent. He's the child. This is just absolutely, like, I'm sorry, but I cannot help but blame the parents for a lot of this stuff. It just comes down to neglecting him, I feel. It just comes down to not being aware or being in their own issues. They're going through a divorce. Obviously, that's going to take a lot of time and energy as parents, meeting with a lawyer, dealing with things emotionally, splitting objects at the house up, and all that. Like, obviously, that's going to take time and energy. And I just feel like the time and energy that the parents were taking had a lot to do with their own issues, and they just looked away from whatever issues that Jeffrey had going on. And at the same time, I can't help but wonder if there's like a level of them being relieved that maybe Jeffrey was off doing something and, they knew he was on the property, but who knows what he was doing, but they didn't have to deal with him. You know what I mean? And Mike, thank you for becoming a member again. I appreciate you being here always. Yeah, I agree. What he did is beyond evil. In my opinion, he got justice in prison. I 100% agree, Tony. I feel like the way that his life ended was absolutely karma, poetic justice, if you will, because he was killed with like a weight from a gym piece, just like his first victim was killed by a dumbbell. So it was just sort of like came full circle for Jeffrey. I 100% think that the way that Manson died of natural causes and old age in prison wasn't as fulfilling, I guess. I know that sounds so sick to say, but like, these people are evil. They did absolutely obscene evil acts. So when they are executed, like Ted Bundy in the electric chair or Gacy, we're supposed to feel a sort of sense of like justice, but I have to say, like, I felt no justice really about Ted Bundy being executed. Like, I didn't really like, because I'm hearing that, like the electric chair isn't even that like terrible, and now they have the needle, which is in certain states, which in my opinion seems kind of like is like, I don't know. Obviously, I don't know like the ins and outs of all that, but I'm just saying, I felt complete justice was served the way that Dahmer was taken out. I just think that was just, it came full circle, like I said.
Apparently, when my former wife and I weren't around.
And that's where he killed his first victim there.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That you knew nothing about.
I knew nothing about it at all.
Do you see anything that you or your wife at the time could have done to prevent this?
Well, there was a lot going on. There was a lot of mental, my former wife.
That's true too. Jen Lou said, I don't know, though Dahmer wanted to die, so was it really justice? I mean, that's a good question. That 100% is a good question. I guess I would say maybe it wasn't true justice, but I guess I would say I was satisfied to hear how Dahmer died when I studied this case for the first time. I read in one article that Christopher Sharver, the gentleman who killed I'm like calling him a gentleman. He was like another murderer. The guy who killed Dahmer in prison, I heard that he said that Dahmer tried to get away for he didn't fight back, but he did try to because he cornered him, obviously. And that's how they were able to kind of get the job done, because that Christopher Sharver guy killed 2 people that day. But apparently in one of the articles I had read about his death, it said that he had tried to escape being cornered, but obviously he met his fate and he died on the way to the hospital. So I'm hoping that he kind of suffered a little bit. Again, I know that's sick to say, but given who we're talking about, I mean, and everything that he did, I guess it is sort of deserving to kind of think hopefully he suffered on the way to the hospital when he died. Don't know though.
We've had a lot of mental and physical problems. And we were so occupied with those problems.
See, this part I sort of believe, and I feel like it's the truth, and I feel like Lionel has he's okay with saying this part, and it is the truth, and he's okay with it because it's bashing the ex-wife. He's pretty much saying we were dealing with a lot of her problems. So, and it sounds truthful, and it appears to be truthful. He's not blinking and having those other bodily, I'm uncomfortable, body language incidents. But here it just seems flat out the truth. They were dealing with issues, the marriage and the mother having postpartum depression and then every other thing that he's kind of claimed she had. So I don't know. I feel like there is a level of him kind of admitting that they were so preoccupied with their own stuff that they missed certain things. But still, I feel like Lionel and the ex-wife don't take responsibility as much as I think they need to.
It was difficult to concentrate on anything else.
Or to see that your child was becoming increasingly lost.
Increasingly shy, that's all that we saw.
Now we'll get into the interview of Jeffrey and the father.
So Pat theories about you as a serial killer striking out to get back at your dad, for instance, don't ring true to you.
No, that has no truth in it. My parents, my relatives had no knowledge of what I was doing. They're absolutely not responsible for any of it in any way. And I take full responsibility.
But you understand that what you did would lead your father to ask himself all kinds of questions.
That's true.
Where did I go wrong? Was there something I could have said or done to have prevented this?
Right.
Did I in some way create or contribute to the terrible acts my son committed?
I understand that. I just get angry with other people who think that they have a right to somehow try to blame my parents for what happened. That's not right at all. No one has the right to do that because.
And here I can kind of see where the behavior panel is saying that it's possible that Jeffrey is a byproduct of a narcissistic parent. And again, I'm not a psychologist or anything like that. I just study these cases just like you guys do. Think about it in a sense of Jeffrey obviously not realizing that he's going to be killed in prison. He says that he expects to die in prison and he knows he might be killed. But here I'm thinking about it from a child whose parents, one of them is a narc. At the same time, Jeffrey knows in a way that he's alone in the world and he needs his parents to kind of be there and visit him and all that. So I can't help but feel like Jeffrey is holding back on the truth about his upbringing and who's to blame and all that because he needs kind of the support of his family at this point in his life and for the rest of his life while he's in prison. So I can't help it. This is just my opinion. I just can't help but feel like Jeffrey is just been conditioned to kind of protect like his father, even though his father might have something to do with it. In a lot of interviews, I find Jeffrey to be very straightforward and honest, and the behavior panel did as well. They said a lot of times it just seems like he's just coming clean with stuff. But when he talks about like, I just don't like when people blame my parents, blah, 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 I'm not feeling that same like genuineness like from him. And it's so strange to say like genuine when we're talking about a serial killer, but Jeffrey, I just feel like there's things that he is 100% truthful about. I mean, he told the officers where the bodies were, what he did with each and every victim. One of the victims, or maybe even a few of them, the body parts were never found. But regardless, it seems like he wanted to bring closure to the victim's family and come clean about things. And he's even said so, which is why he was like 100% cooperative, he says. Whether or not that helps the victims' families, obviously it doesn't, because they'll never have closure, in my opinion. But in my opinion, I just feel like Jeffrey is not being truthful when he's talking about his parents here. And that's just my opinion.
They're totally innocent. They had no knowledge of it. And that angers me.
What kinds of things was Jeff exposed to? What kinds of things did he see and hear?
Nothing out of the ordinary. Well, what can I do? I can compare.
And again, here we go with the mother. I'm just going to warn you guys, like, the parents don't have the same recollection of what happened during Jeffrey's childhood. And it's just so infuriating because it's like, there's just a lot of denial and blame placing in both these parents.
Compare it with my own upbringing, and my mother and father fought.
And that's the other thing that I don't agree with. She's like, well, I compare it with my own upbringing and my mother and father fought. It's like, don't try and compare that, because what ends up happening, and it's called generational trauma, just because you were brought up this way, doesn't mean that you should do that to your child too. Like, it's just, there's like a lack of accountability with this mother here. And it just is like, she's perpetuating possibly her own childhood, what she witnessed as a child, and thinking that that was normal. Like, that wasn't normal, probably, whatever she witnessed, and it got repeated or trickled down. And whatever issues the mother had were probably never dealt with, and maybe they were starting to be dealt with, but by then she was a mother, and instead of putting all her focus on her child, I think that that's when the mother was like, let me just I don't know what was going on. According to Lionel, it was like a psychiatric break. And, that does end up happening sometimes. When women are pregnant, it's called post anxiety. It's like anxiety that you get before you get postpartum anxiety after the baby's born, So I'm not saying that there weren't valid things that the mother was going through, but at the same time, it's unfortunate that the father seemed to be just as distant or just as detached, like, certain cases, the father or maybe the grandparents step in and they're like, wow, she really needs some help. Let's help her. Let's take the baby. I'm reading things that the mother's anxiety postpartum was so bad that when other people wanted to hold Jeffrey, she didn't want them breathing on him because she was afraid that he would be sick. So again, these are just sources that I've looked through and stuff that I've looked at in regards to this case. I don't know how much of it is valid, because here the mother denies certain things too. And it's just very frustrating, but it just leads to more and more evidence that Jeffrey was just, even as a baby, probably just left there, not hugged and loved enough. Just so sad.
And it was kind of a normal thing, and they would get over it. And Lionel and I discovered very early on that we were very different people. I was more emotional and more outgoing than he was. And marriage became really a very unhappy unhappy place. And how much that affected the children at the time, I didn't think that it affected them in any really harmful way because they were never physically abused.
There were very heated arguments.
And they refer a lot to these heated arguments between Lionel and her. And Lionel and her seem to kind of like downplay it. And it's like, it's just dangerous. Children being so young and so impressionable and having to witness that, even if you think they're in the other room and they can't hear or whatever. Excuse me. It's unfortunate that this just seems like another case where the parents were just so into their own like argument and issues that they weren't realizing the problems that were being trickled down to the children, specifically Jeffrey. There was something else I wanted to say about this lady. Hold on, let me just keep playing.
And on occasion, that would lead to some physical.
Excuse me, Stone.
And somebody is sitting there with her. I don't know who it is. I haven't seen this whole interview, but it just, like I said, they're hiding this physical abuse that took place there. They're hiding the truth, I believe. The mother says that, you know, they were getting divorced and she didn't see like issues with the children. Like, I'm sorry, but you need to put your kids in counseling. And I don't mean to sound like I'm like preaching to everybody who's listening, but this is just another example. And being a child of divorce myself, my parents didn't give us counseling. And I feel like that was a very like wrong thing to do. Like, it would have been nice for us to have been able to talk about things with a professional at the time. And if Jeffrey has all this stuff bottling up inside of him and just festering and festering, like, imagine if he had gone to counseling. Like, maybe they didn't want to give him counseling because he was super shy and they didn't think that he needed it. But when your parents are getting divorced, like, I just wonder, like, what would have happened if Lionel and I forget her name, the mother decided, like, you know what, we need to get the boys in some counseling. If we're going to pull the trigger and do this divorce, we got to do the right. Oh, Joyce, her name is. We got to do the right thing and get them some help. I wonder if had they done that, like used their divorce, like a tragedy, obviously, and a traumatizing thing for a child to have to go through, because no matter what, the children always blame themselves in divorce. I just wonder, like, what would have happened? Like, say he went to counseling about going through his parents' divorce. What if he ended up opening up about his desires and fantasies that involved like violence and death and all that? You know what I mean? Like, could people's lives have been saved if there were means of an intervention in some way, shape, or form for Jeffrey? You know, we'll never know, but this would have been the perfect opportunity to kind of get him to go to somebody to talk about. You know, they didn't have to say, like, you're too shy, we need to get you help. Like, the divorce would have been the perfect excuse. Looking at comments, listening to his mother and father, I feel they still focus on themselves more and how they feel compared to their children. I agree. And if one or both are narcissists, then that definitely plays into that. Zero accountability, shaking my head. Even if the children never witnessed one fight, the tension in divorce alone was more than they can deal with. Exactly. And I'm always telling my fiance, like, I want us to hold hands in front of our child. I want us to kiss, you know, in front of her and let her know, like, this is affection. Because I just feel like I wasn't really shown like the best example of love between man and woman too. So it's just, these things could have been done. Or maybe, I don't know. It's just hard to say because every family is different. But I just feel like there's just, like you said, a lack of accountability with both the parents and what they did and what they didn't do. And children see more than we think they do, 100%. It's just so sad to think, you know, whatever arguments the parents were having, you know, it obviously affected a developing mind in Jeffrey.
If you want to stop a minute and think about whether you want to talk about that abuse on this
How am
program,
I going to know
certainly with
what's
great
going to be
respect
on
for you,
television and what's not going to
don't want
be?
to help her on this
Well,
account.
I mean, I think you need to assume, while only a very small portion of this will be on. I mean, I want you to be comfortable with what you say, because
Well, one of the things that I don't want to get involved in on this television show is trying to do the same thing to Lionel as he's done to me, and that is to somehow blame him. So
I'm not asking. I really don't want to get to
Is this
whose
part
fault.
off
No,
the
we're
table?
rolling. But I'm just saying, I don't want to get. I am really not concerned with fault and whether it was you or whether it was Lionel. What I'm trying to understand is what was going on between you for whatever reason. I'm sure both of you brought something to the table on that. That's usually the case in a marriage situation. My question is, what kinds of things, what do you recall about the kinds of things that were happening between you that Jeff may have been exposed to? And to the extent that there is some question about the kind of emotional turmoil that might have caused him.
Stone, I have to tell you, I've thought of that over and over again, and there's nothing about the kind of arguments, the kinds of fights we might have had, the disagreements over how to bring up children, there was nothing unusual about that. And Jeff is not the result of what is going on in every home in America. He's not the result of that.
So you're saying it wasn't a perfect marriage, you're saying, but it was nothing so extraordinary that it could explain
no
why he went on to do what he did.
Absolutely not. Telling you the truth the very best I can, there wasn't anything unusual.
We'd have to call the doctor, who in those days they still made house calls, and he came immediately, and it always ended up that he gave her a shot of some type of relaxant.
What kind of drugs was she on?
There were a mixture of things. He would have to come and inject Seconal or morphine if in some instances when her body would not relax.
The doctor?
Yeah, the doctor.
Morphine, barbiturates?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Relaxants. Mm-hmm.
Phenobarbital?
Yes. Uh-huh.
She was on a pretty heavy
regimen.
drug
She was on quite a heavy diet of prescription drugs, right.
What do you remember about the pregnancy?
I had what I thought were probably the ordinary kinds of things that happen when you're pregnant, and
morning sickness.
A
lot of nausea.
Yes.
Lionel describes a strange, undiagnosed problem. He describes it as some kind of a seizure that you developed, a proneness to seizures late in the pregnancy, where he describes it as a kind of rigidness for which you were prescribed medications. Do you remember that, and can you describe it?
I don't remember that at all. I can't imagine where that comes from. It isn't true. I don't.
You don't recall anything?
And this lady, and when she does this little laugh, when he's asking her certain questions, there'll be a time where she's like, and it's just that it's what's funny? I don't know. It just seems like another example of the parents not being 100% forthcoming. And I think it goes without saying that the environment that the baby grows in, and anything that the mother is taking in during pregnancy while the child is in utero, I mean, that 100% has a lot to do with the child's, I don't know, makeup in a way, I guess. We've even seen it, and without getting too much into that argument or debate, it is a valid class action lawsuit right now. Mothers who were pregnant taking Tylenol, if your child has ADHD or autism, they've scientifically linked it to Tylenol intake during pregnancy while the child's in utero. So I 100% do think that, you know, medications that you're taking when you're pregnant 100% trickle down to the fetus and the makeup of the child. But I'm still not convinced, in my opinion, and everyone know what you're thinking in chat and on replay. I'm just still not there to the point where I'm thinking that his issues had to do with prescription drugs during his development in the utero time. But again, we'll never know, you know, we'll never know. And the fact that his brain wasn't kept and preserved and studied, I mean, if there's another Dahmer out there, wouldn't it have been interesting to kind of compare their brains, like whoever this next Dahmer person potentially could be? And again, there are people out there who do the things that Dahmer did. They're still out there. That's how people were able to kind of study Dahmer, like during the trial and stuff, because they dealt with other people who did heinous acts like he did. But you guys let me know what you're thinking as far as if it's true, which she's denying, and of course she's denying it. If it's true that she had all these like barbiturates and anti-seizure medications and morphine at one point during her pregnancy, could it have developed Jeffrey into what he is? You know what I mean?
Anything like that?
No.
Seizures or
No.
seizure-like episodes?
Absolutely not.
Were you prescribed medications, including morphine, barbiturates?
I don't know what medications were prescribed, and I'm surprised that anyone says that there is something that lists every single medication I took 33 years ago. I had a doctor, a physician. I took the medicine that was prescribed for me, and for the most part, I was healthy.
You weren't on morphine?
I don't think you give pregnant women morphine. I'd have to.
And here he asked her, you know, flat out, you weren't on morphine? And she laughs. I don't think they give pregnant women. Doctors, unfortunately, do wrong things too, especially back then. Remember at this point when Jeffrey was, I mean, he was born the same year my father was born, 1960. I mean, women weren't even told that they shouldn't smoke during pregnancy yet. Like the time of this interview, I don't know when it was. It looks 90s. I don't even know if like it was really talked about even then. I don't know. I know that people were smoking during pregnancies in the 80s and stuff. So I don't believe her at all. Yeah, exactly. How do you not know what you're prescribed? I just feel like, good morning, Blues Clues Brokey. I feel like she's absolutely lying. And yeah, they do give morphine during labor and stuff too, like small doses. But either way, yeah, they could, that's a good point. The child may suffer from withdrawal. Yeah, that's sad to think about, and it does happen. But I'm just wondering if she's just, again, another example of her not being honest.
Ask my doctor, but they don't give pregnant women morphine.
Barbiturates of any kind in order to calm you down in these seizure states, as Lionel described?
It sounds to me like these seizure states and everything that Lionel says, it sounds like she was having like manic, like psychotic, like outbursts, like I don't know. Yet she's denying.
There were no seizure states.
I
don't know where that's coming from.
Again with the laughing.
Well, Stone, I don't know. And it's one of the reasons why I'm finally speaking out, because
agree, CDT.
There were no seizures. There was nothing that was out of the ordinary as far as my pregnancy was concerned, except that I needed to be in bed.
There's an obvious discrepancy here between what you're saying and what Lionel is saying about the nature of the pregnancy. It was difficult, you both agree, but he describes you in these states where you were, as he says, literally frothing at the mouth.
Are you serious?
In these rigid states.
frothing at the mouth. And look at how he like he just like leaves that statement there on the table for her. Like, look at him. He's like, yeah, I just said that. Now what?
Yeah. For which you were given medication to settle or calm you down.
Well, I don't know what his purpose is in doing that. I do know that.
Agree, CDT. She said one of the reasons she's speaking out is all to defend herself. Very telling, in my opinion. Agree. And I feel like that's what the father's book was about too. Get his, version of the truth out there and able to defend himself, go on all these interviews on Oprah, etc., and put the blame on the mother, who's obviously defensive for that, but also in denial about the truth of what happened. It's like another reason why the brain not being saved, it's unbelievable, because now we have just these accounts from the parents and they don't match up, so they're not 100% the truth. We don't have the brain to study. It's just absolutely a waste. Her son was a monster. She's defensive, period. Yeah. And he's the way he is, debatably, because that's the whole question, nature or nurture, you know what I mean?
When this first happened, the very first thing that the husband that I divorced did was come out with these accusations against me. They're not true. Well, I don't know how I can prove it to you that they're not true.
Is it possible you just don't remember them?
No, it's not possible. I don't remember them. It was my first pregnancy. I remember everything about my first pregnancy.
You've read his book.
Yes.
Joyce, you have not read it.
No, I haven't.
Joyce has not read it yet. Joyce has been not well, and reading that book, which just came out, hasn't been something she was ready for.
The excerpts that I have seen in the newspaper are so astounding to me. He told everyone that I was crazy, that I had abused my body with medicines, that I somehow was to blame. There's no doubt about that. Now he turns around and, for whatever his reasons are, I don't know what he's trying to accomplish with talking about something he should have shared with me before he ever married me. If he's got some thought that had anything to do with.
So that statement Shrew's referring to Lionel coming out saying that he's had his own dark thoughts, and which was why another reason why he wanted to write the book is kind of to share that, like, oh, was this my fault? Because I've had these dark thoughts too, even though he'd never acted on them. Now she's pretty much saying, like, I wish I had known that before I married him, which is kind of, in a way, like, understandable, because, like, if you're going to procreate with somebody, like, don't you want to know if there's some sort of like genetic issue, or like, ooh, if you're having thoughts of like hurting people, like, might not be a good genetic pattern to, spread around, and maybe I should date around more. I don't know. Again, I'm just saying, like, if things were a perfect world and he came out and told her, like, yeah, laying in bed smoking a joint or whatever they're doing back then, like, yeah, I've had thoughts of killing myself, like, maybe she would have been like, I don't think we should see each other anymore. So I kind of understand a little bit, as much as I cannot stand the father and mother here. I kind of understand a little bit of her being like, man, I wish I would have known this. I mean, that kind of would have been nice to know about somebody before you marry them and have children with them. But again, it's just another example of like the father being the type that like keeps things in to himself and doesn't share things, it seems, and probably didn't talk to his wife or son enough. It's just like a whole bunch of like issues here. Like, it's just a perfect storm, they say.
Jeff.
You mean his mental state, that you weren't informed?
Dreaming of murder.
Yes, exactly.
The obsession with explosives. He never talked to you about any of that.
None of that.
I think one of the points is it's all clear in retrospect. I mean, For instance, one of the anecdotes that he tells in the book, Joyce, is when Jeff was 4 years old and Lionel had crawled underneath the house to remove some dead animals. And he put some of the bones from the dead animals into a bucket. And Jeff, at age 4, probably innocently, went over and was playing with the bones and seemed fascinated
That
with these
absolutely
bones.
astounds me. Excuse me for interrupting you, but I never heard anything like that ever happened.
You see, you're doing a television show prompted by a book which was written, which apparently is one parent's story, which doesn't jive with the other parent's story at all.
What was in the box?
Well, as I learned later, after the trial, it was one of the human heads, one of the victims, which he then took to his work and put in the locker. I told Jeff, I can't imagine what I would do if.
Okay, I just have to pause this intense moment about the head in the box to read Florida Bass Fishing's comment. I don't think my wife needs to know everything about my past. She would have run away. Oh, that's fair. That's fair. So maybe we can excuse Lionel for not sharing his dark thoughts. Crazy.
If I would have opened that box and found that, because I probably would have reacted in my typical fashion of just shock and numbness. I probably would have thought that, maybe it's an artificial, some type of, I don't know, an occult thing or just some decorative thing, that something, but not human.
That's just, I just feel like his father has just continuously stayed in denial too. Like even when discussing about like, yeah, there was a head in the box, he's just kind of like still in denial that was what it was. I don't know. So let me just share my screen again, guys. And read from my notes. My handwriting's messy and the notes are all over the place. But as we look at the crime scene pictures, and again, these are the faces of the victims. It's just so sad. I'm looking at all of them right in the eye, and it's like these were people. They were live. They were, ages from 14 to I think 31. Young. And what's just so creepy too is like the fact that they were pretty much taken under the guise of like, it was like a date. You know what I mean? Like he brought them to the apartment and it was like, they had one thing in mind probably of what was going to happen besides the ones that he said that they were just there for photos and he was going to pay them. But it's just crazy. They felt like they could trust him enough, or that they had like a connection with this guy enough to go back to his place. And it's just so creepy to think about. And it's just kind of reemphasizes being very safe and cautious when you guys are out dating. Like it sucks dating. And especially nowadays with Tinder and all that, it's just very easy to just meet up with people and go to their house and stuff. And I feel like Tinder would have been like so ideal for Dahmer if he was around. Like nowadays, it's just so easy to connect with people, and he wouldn't have had to go out to the bars, and it's wild to think that they trusted him. You know what I mean? Like it wasn't like he lured them back with like, I have an issue. Like it wasn't like he got them to his car with like car issues and then like tied them up or anything. Like he explicitly says like he wasn't into torture. Like it had nothing to do with that. It had nothing to do with this being a hate crime. He makes it evident, like, because when he makes his statement in the trial, he pretty much says like the reason why I wanted this to go to trial, even though I know that I'm guilty and I'm coming clean about everything, is because I want to make it clear that this wasn't a hate crime, he says. And then he talks about how he wanted to know himself, like what was wrong with him. So like he was full aware that he would be under like evaluation and all that. How much of what he was saying is true, I don't know. But from everything we know, it seems like his victims were just men that he really just found attractive and wanted to be with. It had nothing to do with them being like hate crimes. But yeah, I mean, Florida, that is definitely it's evident. That's definitely evident. And they returned the kid to him. And you guys know that one of my very close family members is federal law enforcement. And he and I talk obviously about cases, and we talked about Dahmer, and I said, I asked him for a voice memo, like to send me a voice memo about his opinion about the Dahmer case. And I was like, I pretty much said, I wish you could send me a voice memo. He's very busy. So, and he doesn't want me really to like have him. He's like, yeah, he joked around about putting like a disguise over his voice, like hiding it. But he gave me his opinion on the Dahmer case via text. And he pretty much just said, I can't believe the cops returned the kid. And that was just his whole thing that he had to say about his opinion on like the case coming from someone. I mean, this isn't just he's gone to school for criminal justice and studied all that for years. Like, he's not just a cop. Like, he's so I really wanted his take on it, and all he had to say was, I cannot believe the cops brought him back to that apartment. And it's just inconceivable. Like, when you're studying the case and when you watch the Netflix show and you see that scene, I mean, I don't understand. Like, yeah, exactly, Nikki. Infuriating. I mean, that is the only word for it. And that 911 call with the neighbor and them saying that that was true and real, and she's asking over and over, are you sure that they were together and that they're a couple, and and he wasn't a kid, because it looked like a kid. And it's just like, oh my gosh, I want to pull my hair out listening to that. Okay, so the other thing that I want to think about too as we look at these photos, like, I know it's just so grim to think about, but I can't help it. And I can't help but think, like, this apartment is the last place these people saw. And it's just like so gross. Like, look, the air conditioner under the window with the fan next to it. No wonder the neighbors are smelling stuff. This guy's just like pushing his entire like fumes and like air all around up through the vents. It's just disgusting. Okay, so let me play this while I read. And thank you guys for being here. So the mental health personality diagnosis varied from every specialist that evaluated Dahmer, and still to this day, all the opinions about what he has, what he is, vary. But mental health personnels were pretty much saying that at the time he was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, schizotypal disorder, psychotic disorder, substance abuse disorder, obviously with alcohol, antisocial personality disorder. And again, not everyone was agreeing on those diagnoses, and not everyone to this day agrees on his diagnosis. And again, if I can look up at chat, if you guys want me to pause it on any photos, let me know and I'll try to pause it. But I am looking down at my notes, so in case I'm not the best at seeing it, sorry. But so there's lots of mystery surrounding his true diagnosis and mental health state. Some professionals in prison were treating him with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. Lots of confusion on what was going on with him diagnostically. So Dahmer admits to compulsions. Even in prison, he never referred to these compulsions as voices or commands. So you know how, like, in the Son of Sam case, he pretty much blames everything on like voices he was hearing. This is pretty much reiterating that Dahmer never pretty much blamed things that he did or his compulsions on voices or anything like that. So I find that interesting. But he talks a lot about wanting control and dominance. He felt pleasure when he gave into these compulsions and ideas. He didn't hate anyone or want revenge. He describes it as just seeking most beautiful so he could take them home, wanting them to be a part of him, and that plays into him eating them. Disgusting. I can't even. Terrible. The murders were the only thing that gave him satisfaction. So obviously that was realized to him the first time he ever murdered somebody at 18, and it was the only way that he felt satisfied. So that's why it continued. It's so sad and disgusting. No one else to blame but him, he says. No point in trying to hide it any longer. When he got arrested, he pretty much was like ready. And he said that he likely kill again given the chance. This obviously is some of the medications that he used to sedate and put them under, the drugging that he used. So the body language, the behavior panel experts on that channel were pretty much saying that he appears to be very open and truthful in his interviews. And again, I feel that way for the most part, except for when he's talking about his childhood and his parents. And we kind of talked about that up until this point, that we just feel like there's a little bit of not truthfulness and straightforwardness and acceptance of what possibly happened to him with the parents knowing, or, obviously they didn't know, and that's a problem in itself. So he never tried, like I said, for an appeal. He seemed to accept it. He admits to feeling like he was evil or sick or possibly both. Stated he was ready to accept being in prison for his life. This was a question I was going to ask you guys, with two of his victims escaping. One of them escaped, and that was his SA charge that he went to 10 months for, and the other one escaped, and that's the night he got arrested and discovered. Do you guys feel that he was an organized serial killer or unorganized? So let me know your thoughts there. It says he gave into impulses even though he held a job for a long time. He was arrested frequently, so those are just like things that took place in his mind, even though he could hold a job and appear like a normal person and that things were stable, obviously things were not stable. He was referred to as a loner by his classmates. But at the same time, he was able to apply superficial charm when needed. Obviously, that helped him bring the people back to his apartment. The charm that he had, as well as alcohol, I feel, gave him the courage. Like a lot of people get liquid courage. He has traits of psychopathy, but when they tested it, I guess, like when he was alive, he fell short of the cutoff for psychopathy. Again, I don't know. These are just notes that I'm reading from Dr. Grande's videos on him and from the behavior panel's videos on him. I haven't sourced every single thing 100%. I'm curious if that is true. Like, did he really fall short of the cutoff for psychopathy? Let me know if you guys know, because I know that there's other Dahmer experts out there. So, but nowadays they were pretty much saying that it seems, regardless of the medical records that he had or the scorecard for psychopathy, it seems like people are under the impression nowadays, even though he's not around to be examined, that it seems 100% valid that he has psychopathy. So they questioned a lot if his psychotic episodes that he was having it's called like brief psychotic disorder. You guys can dig into all that, but these are just some of my notes about what the experts were saying about him. But in prison, like I said earlier, he was treated with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. So, just looking through notes. So apparently I have in here that some of the teachers noticed signs of neglect with him. I'm thinking it had more to do with, maybe the alcohol or something like that. Here is obviously where they found the Polaroids in the drawer. He had very few friends. It seems like, so his father was an analytical chemist. 1968, was when he was shown by his father how to bleach the bones. Father claims he was unaware of his son's bizarre loner behaviors and fantasies. I also have in here at one point, it says when he was 17 years old, it's rumored that the mother was having an affair. Obviously, he was shown an unhealthy display of love in his home and upbringing. He barely graduated. The divorce finalized the year he was graduated. His grandma supported him when he was in between jobs. Like that was before he got that job at the chocolate factory. He really did try to dig up a grave and grave rob for gratification, we'll just say. But the ground was frozen. Let me just read this, my handwriting. Okay, we covered that. Dahmer himself admits to being desensitized. He doesn't really say how or why, but in my opinion, I just feel like it has a lot to do. Hi, Adrian, good to see you. Him being like alone for so long and neglected. It's like, what was he doing? You know, the roadkill stuff. Why wasn't there a level of him being grossed out by it? You know, like what was going on? That probably is why he became so desensitized, like so easily. He claims that he preferred his victims alive, like we were saying earlier. That's why he tried to make them into zombies with the drill in the head and the acid in there. Killing wasn't the goal or the most gratifying part, he says. That's why he tried to kill them in the most humane way, apparently, which is debatable. And yeah, so that, I think pretty much those are all my notes. We've gone through it. I just want to get your guys' thoughts at the question at play here. You know, what happened to Dahmer? Was this a case of nature or nurture? Was he born this way because of genetics from the parents? Was it the medications the mother was taking during her pregnancy while he's in utero? Was it, you know, pretty much nature loads the gun and nurture pulls the trigger is like a common saying. This picture, I don't know how anyone's feeling about who has watched the Netflix series, but ever since I watched the Netflix, I'm like, I can't eat like meat like the same way. I know that sounds terrible, but like I just see this picture of the salt there on the left and I'm like, look how like gone it is, like how much salt has been used and not filled. And it's like, makes me absolutely sick to think about like him using all that salt for his cooking. I'm like, I can't. It's just too much, guys. It's just a lot to unravel with this case and that show on Netflix. And I highly recommend it for those who haven't watched it. I know, like I said, it's disgusting to talk about all this stuff, but at the same time, like studying true crime, if you're not studying this case, then I don't know what you're doing, because it's one of the ones that you have to. And this, I like zoomed in on this above. This is in the living room, guys. It just goes into the whole thing. Like I said earlier, imagine this apartment being the last place you ever saw. It's just disgusting. And like, look at that. Like, it's like a demon or something up there. Like, and he like hung it up there and it's just like laughing. It just is so disturbing, isn't it? I heard his father said he had some thoughts in his book. Yeah, Linda, apparently, and that's what the mother was saying, like, boy, I wish I would have known that before I married him. It's just obscene and troubling and explains a lot in a way, you know? So it just goes back to like, okay, so was this like some like illness in like the parents' genes that trickle down? But then you look at the other brother and he's fine. Sorry, Duty Ronnie said, watching as I eat breakfast. Thanks, ATS. Yeah, it's just, it's too much. Sorry. It definitely will turn your appetite to nothing. But guys, it's just unbelievable. Everything here. Like, look at that face. It's disturbing. And another, that's what I wanted to talk about too with you guys. I just don't understand the whole, like, the father showing him how to bleach the bones and do taxidermy, like, on a regular basis. Like, in this series, it shows, like, them riding in the car together and him being like, hey, Dad, and look at this kitchen. It just grosses me out. Like, imagine sitting on the couch and, like, looking over to the left and, like, just seeing the kitchen like this. I'm just like, oh. I would have wanted to, like, run out of there. Like, I think I gotta go. And look how much Dawn's soap he has there on the counter. It's just interesting because then it's like, I don't know. I don't know why it, like, interests me, but he has bleach around there too, and a mop and a bucket. It's like he's, like, ready to go with cleanup. It's part of, like, the whole routine. Like, make sure he has his cleanup stuff ready. Unbelievable. Yeah, I'm sure, like, some people thought his stuff looked nice. And that's the thing too, is like he obviously was able to get men back to his place, like dates. He was able to, people thought he was attractive, and to this day, men and women still think he's attractive. And all I could think too is I was so, like, disturbed watching some of the trial clips on court TV. And I seen him at one point lean into his defense attorney to whisper something. And all I could think about was, like, his breath, like, reeking because of, like, the people he ate. And I know that it's been, like, time in between, like, the trial and his last, like, person he ate, but I was just like, I couldn't help but just think, imagine, like, being his lawyer and just, like, looking at him and, like, talking to you and, like, his mouth moving, you looking at his teeth and just thinking about, like, what that mouth was doing, and it had nothing. Oh my gosh. It's just so disgusting. Exactly. He was one sick dude. I can't handle this stuff. Been around many, many gruesome crime scenes in my 20 years with the PD. Yeah, it's just, I can't imagine. Like, when those guys opened the drawer and discovered those Polaroids and realized that, like, this was, like, real. Like, can you imagine the double take they probably took, like, a million times, blinking at these pictures? Like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Like, these aren't, like, displays of, like, mannequins or a joke, a Halloween joke. Like, this is real. Sorry, Ken. He said, I think I will skip breakfast this morning. I'm telling you, I'm not joking, and I'm not being over dramatic. Like, I have not been able to eat meat the same after watching this series and studying this case as closely as I have. That's why I had to come on here with you guys. I need to get all this off my chest and have the discussion on all this to break it down and just put it to bed after the series is done. I'm a little bit still in the last episode, and I got to finish it. And then, yeah, it's something that was interesting to study because, again, like I said, there's a lot of mystery around his diagnosis, etc. But all right, guys, I just want to play these pictures still as we discuss, and share your thoughts in chat, because I'm just looking through my notes and we pretty much have covered a lot of this. And how many of you guys just dissected stuff in biology? Like, in 10th or 11th grade, I think we did owl pellets, I think they're called. It's like where the owls throw up, and we do that in class, and we like dissect their, like, it's like a hairball, and it had, like, bones of birds and stuff that the owl ate, or bones of rodents, whatever owls eat. But anyways, so yeah, we did that, and then we did frogs. Yeah, we did frogs. But anyways, they talk about how Dahmer did that, and they did, like, a fetal pigs or whatever, and he, like, took his home. And I'm just referring back to Lionel doing the taxidermy stuff with him. And I'm just like, it's one thing to kind of show your child that. And in biology, at the end of the year, like we had a huge project we had to do. And one of the options was come in on Saturday when school obviously isn't going on. And your teacher will do one day where they show you, you know, how to do taxidermy. And the students, we were told, like, if you want to do that as your project, get like a fresh as possible piece of roadkill, put it in your freezer in some bags, bring it in Saturday, and I'll show you how to do it. And that'll be your project. I didn't do that because at the same time, I'm like grossed out by it, which shows you a level of how desensitized Dahmer was. Because, you know, for me, was given the opportunity to do that as like a project for class. And I mean, the teachers pretty much, I heard, like, did a lot of it for these kids. And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. But here we have Dahmer just being kind of like overly obsessed with it as a kid. And like how these are real pictures too, guys, like of the skulls and stuff. The level of like the father, like teaching him how to bleach the bones. And like, I get it. He's a chemist, but like, it just seemed like it was a habit that was just overemphasized. And these are the handcuffs from the last victim of his that escaped. When he was wearing like one of the handcuffs still. And like, so pretty much I'm just saying, like, it just seems like the father, like, aiding in this whole, like, teaching him how to use this formaldehyde and acid and bleaching the bones. And I get it. Like, it would have been like a nice weekend project one time or something, you know what I mean? Or if they found like an exotic animal that they've never seen dead before, like, oh son, you know what, let's get this turkey, or you know what I mean? It just seemed like it was like an unhealthy habit that the father kind of like fueled, or like didn't say. Like, imagine if Lionel was different, and maybe at one point if Dahmer said, Dad, I want to do roadkill taxidermy again this weekend. Imagine if Lionel said, like, you know, we've been doing that, we've done it enough, I think we need a break, and you know what, son, next time we see roadkill, I think we're going to have a burial for it, because I think that you need to learn to respect things that pass. And this animal, you know, it was a living thing at one point, it roamed the forest, you know what I mean? Like, I'm just saying, like, imagine if his father was different, how things would have changed possibly for him and his mental state and all that. Like, it's just, yeah, CDT. And I wonder if she said he should have become a medical examiner. I wonder if that's why he went down the route of the medic, but at that point he was just sick in the head and just damaged. You know, like, it could have gone to that. I think he could have become something like that if, hold on, let me pause this picture on the screen. These ones are black and white, but it's pictures of his fridge. Imagine if it did go in like a route that was more, like, yeah, Alejandra showing him what empathy was. He could have become a medical examiner, in my opinion. You know what I mean? It's so disturbing that the dad fostered this thing in him. It seems like that, Pink Dahlia, for sure. That's a good way to put it, like fostering it, for sure. And like, look at these condiments. And I'm just like, oh, just thinking about what he might have, like, oh, let me just spice this up here with a little bit of mustard. Like, what the heck? And we all know what's in the bottom drawer there. They don't show it, but yeah, that bottom drawer had somebody's head in it. It's unreal. It's absolutely unreal. Nikki Rex said, I struggle to prepare a roast chicken. Yeah, exactly. It's just too much, like, to handle and like look at the parts and all that. But for Dahmer, it was just, yay. It's just unbelievable, guys. But I don't know, guys. Ultimately, I'm like obviously disturbed by everything I learned about his upbringing and his parents. I do think that nature loads the gun and nurture pulls the trigger. Nature loads the gun, nurture pulls the trigger. Sorry, I had to repeat it. And unfortunately, it's just the nurturing aspect in this person's life. And the guy on the left is the man who killed him in prison. The nurturing aspect in this case is questionable, 100%. And it seems as though the genetics in this case are possible. I know that the mother died of cancer, which I'm not sure which one it was, if it was a genetic one or whatever, but it's all questionable for him. And it's, like I said, it's just a waste that the parents, you know, in true to certain divorced parents, they will argue on everything. And they argued over whether or not to preserve their son's brain for study, you know, and the father being a damn scientist blows my mind that he did not want people to save his brain and study it. Like, I'm just blown away by that aspect. And it's such a waste, you know? But anyways, guys, I'm happy you guys spoke about or talked with me through this case. If you haven't seen the Netflix series, then I definitely recommend it. If you like true crime, I will definitely warn you. It's disturbing, obviously, but if you made it through this live stream and the photos there, then I think you'll be okay with watching the series. But that's pretty much all I had to say. And I really appreciate you guys being here. And thank you, Judy Ron, for popping in chat. I appreciate it. And I will talk to you guys all very soon. And yeah, that's all I have for you guys. So talk soon. And CDT is going live later, I believe, around 11 or noon. So I'll be in chat over there if you guys want to talk over there. So bye, guys.